Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Alyssa Carruthers, and I'm a proud U Calgary alumni and co-founder and chair of the Scholars Academy U Calgary Alumni Network Affinity Community. Especially in these times of physical distancing and virtual connections, I like to think about who I'm sharing this space with now, both near and far. Today, we are broadcasting from Calgary, which is located on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. The University of Calgary is situated on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, and the traditional Blackfoot name for this place is Mokissis, which we now call the city of Calgary. Thank you for joining us today for Lessons from the Wild Dogs of Africa, Creating a Winning Culture. This is just one of more than 25 virtual programs being held throughout September for Alumni Month. Our alumni's passion, vision, and involvement in the community here and around the world elevate U Calgary's reputation as a global leader and change maker. In celebration of our 190,000 strong U Calgary alumni community, we have curated an exciting selection of programs featuring alumni who will inspire you, conversations that will inform you, and expertise that will guide you. I encourage everyone to check out the entire Alumni Month schedule at alumni.ucalgary.ca/alumni-month. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Dr. Marvin Washington is a professor in the Alberta School of Business and Associate Dean of Executive Education. Dr. Washington's research, teaching, and consulting focus on processes of organizational and institutional change. The author of 3 books on leadership and organizational change, Dr. Washington has also worked with a variety of companies such as Enbridge, Aimco, Blue Cross, YMCA, Parkland Fuels, Syncrude, and SportCheck, many ministries and departments in the country of Botswana, the state of Oregon, government of Alberta, and the city of Edmonton. Prior to life in academia, Dr. Washington was a manufacturing manager for Procter & Gamble, where he was responsible for Zest Bar soap. When not teaching, researching, or consulting, Marvin can be found hanging out with his 2 sons, both students at the University of Alberta, or coaching basketball. Today's session will include a 10-minute Q&A period at the end of Dr. Washington's presentation. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Your name will be attached to the question you ask and may be visible to the audience. If you do not want your name attached to your question, please submit your question anonymously by checking the Send Anonymously checkbox. We appreciate all of your questions, but please be advised that due to our limited time, we may not be able to answer all of them. A recording of today's program will be available on the Alumni Month website by the end of the week. Let's get started.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to let me spend some time talking about a passion of mine. But I like a fast start. And by fast start, I want you to think about a time back when, even now in terms of social distancing, you and your 2 friends, you're out for a walk, and you run up against one of these snakes. So you literally see a snake wherever you're walking at. Now, if you're like most people, what would you do? You would see the snake, especially one like that, in wherever you are, unless you're in where these snakes are supposed to be, and you're going to jump. Probably run across the street as far away as possible. That makes sense. But now here's the challenge for us as humans. We all walk through life with what I call an idiot meter. Whenever a situation happens, we look and see who's the idiot here. And what's interesting is we're never the idiot. So let's go back to the same situation. While you're across the street, you see your 2 friends, they are not across the street. They're over where the snake is. Well, the first thing you're thinking is, there must be idiots. So then learning goes to 0. You're not going to learn anything from the situation if you label it like that. What you may not know is one of your friends has been spending her entire evenings for the last 5 years getting her PhD in that exact snake. I don't know, she's a snakeologist or something like that. Well, think about what she would do. If she saw the snake, she would run actually toward the snake, possibly even pick it up and look at it. Now, what you didn't know about your third friend is that every Tuesday, he worships that snake. That snake is actually his God. Now, what would that person do? That person would see the snake and they would bow down. They're not worthy. They would celebrate that that snake, their God, has come to grace them with their presence. Now, here's what's fascinating. 3 different reactions. One person's across the street, one person runs toward the snake, and one person is bowed down. Did the snake change? No. So all the insight, all the awareness, all the opportunity for learning and for growth is in you, in your own head. Now, how are you going to pull that learning and growth out? First, you have to be a bit vulnerable. You have to ask questions. Now, we often ask questions, but we do it with that idiot meter in our head. Something like, hey, idiot, why are you over there by the snake? Or, hey, stupid, don't you know the snake's going to bite you? A true question would say, I'm curious. I wonder why you didn't run. So what would the person say? I spent 5 years studying these snakes. I grew up around these snakes. Now, you've learned something. That doesn't mean you can cross the street and go where the snakes are. Why? Because you don't have that expertise. But now you've learned something. That's a difficult conversation to ask. Why? Because you got a little bit of vulnerability there. You have to show you don't know all the answers. The second question is really hard. Because now when you go to the second person, the religious bowing down to the snake, what are they going to say? The snake is my God. I can't believe you ran away from it. You're going to hell. And as soon as we think this is a story about a snake, this is a story about so many conversations in 2020. You just fill in the blank. And all you see is people say, this makes sense. People say, this is stupid. People say, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. And we have a hard time talking to each other. So in some sense, if you really want to know me, I'm just a snake. I'm a snake with some ideas about culture. I'm a snake with some ideas about leadership and teamwork. I'm a snake with some ideas about how do we then maintain all of that in this crazy 2020 world. Some of you will end and say, oh, this makes sense. Some of you will say, wow, it's as if you're reading my mail. And some of you will be across the street. This is an idiot. Get him off the stage. I don't think the insight is with me as much as the insight is with you in terms of why you're saying that. Now, with that as a preamble, let's get to what the topic is today. So if I had a worldview on anything, this would be my worldview. And if I had a sexier title, maybe I'd be richer. But it's basically Marvin's Triangle. And the idea is when you think about organizations, for-profit, corporate, educational, healthcare, you have these 3 points of the triangle. You have a leader or a leadership group that's trying to set some direction. You have strategy, which ends up being the direction. Then you have culture, which is how the direction gets executed and implemented. All 3 pieces have to be moving in the right direction. If one is not attended to, you get into trouble. Now, when we think about culture and think about leadership, that's where teams come in. Because often as a leader, we produce groups that are smaller than the big organization in order to work on these issues or challenges or problems. But I think teams is what I would call the biggest false friend. We all think we understand what that word means, but often we don't. We struggle with the word. For example, actually think about actual teams. And so imagine you grew up playing basketball and a friend of yours grew up playing football or hockey or maybe baseball. All of those are actually teams, but the teamness is different. Think for a minute the baseball team. What actually makes that team a team? There is sequential coordination, and so each person gets a turn to bat. There is expertise that is very segmented. You're the best catcher. You're the best left fielder. You're a middle reliever. You're the third baseman. And then the coordination is really done by the coach or the leader. Think the coach comes out, makes some sign, tell people to sort of move over or those types of things. That's a team. Let's contrast that what I would call almost in the opposite direction, a basketball or a hockey team. Think about on the basketball team. All players are moving at the same time. All players get to touch the ball at any time. Any player can dribble, any player can shoot, any player can pass. Now imagine if you're thinking about your work team as a baseball team and you're in a team with someone who's thinking about that same team as a basketball team. Think about the conversation. The basketball sort of influence people will say, look at those prima donnas. They don't want to help. They stay in their spot and they don't help at all. What do you think the baseball people are saying? Look at those basketball players. They're all over the place. They don't just stay in their spot. Why are they over helping me? Because if I'm the baseball guy, I'm thinking, I'm right field, you're third base. I got this spot here, you got that spot over there. And until I need to throw the ball to you, we're good. Leave me alone. Now take that to work. Now we often see that when we think about things called teams, they often lead to conflict because we experience teams the wrong way. My favorite is we have in Edmonton here this big Saville Center. You may have come up to bring your son or daughter to play basketball or volleyball. It can hold something like 30 volleyball games at the same time in this facility. If you've ever been to a volleyball tournament, it is loud. They cheer everything. The one girl makes a spike on the serve, and what do they say? Good cheer. At the next play, they spike the ball into the net. What do they say? Get it next time. We've all had those types of people on our teams that just want to celebrate every moment. So if this concept of team is struggling, but yet we need teams, that's how we build culture. We need teams, that's how we execute a lot. What do we do with that? That's where I was in the country of Botswana. So if you don't know the country of Botswana, it's in Southern Africa. It's about the size land mass of Alberta. It's about the population of Alberta if you take away Edmonton or Calgary, one of the big cities. We have oil in Alberta, diamonds in Botswana. So very similar feel in terms of resource base, in terms of the population size, the land mass size. Unfortunately for Botswana, though, HIV/AIDS. So they had, at some point when I was there in the late 90s, early 2000s, they had the highest rate of HIV/AIDS. And so a friend of mine, Stephen Hacker, and I, we were doing work in the country of Botswana, really helping them create strategies to deal with this issue. How are they going to, in some practical sense, keep the country afloat with the resources they had, and at the same time deal with HIV/AIDS? Because AIDS wasn't just a health issue; it was a financial issue, it was a government issue. One example we had, just to sort of push the point, we had training with the principals and the school heads of all the high schools in the country, because how they were dealing with the disease was just to collapse the classrooms. So if a teacher gets sick and a teacher goes away, one class of 20, two classes of 20 becomes one class of 40. Another teacher gets sick, one class of 40 becomes a class of 60. And they realized they couldn't keep doing that. So they needed another way to think through education because of this issue. It gets worse. They're a very proud culture. And so think about what we do. If the teacher wants to get in touch with their student, with the parent, they will send a note home to the kids. Have your parent sign this. Well, the kids in school there, if their parents were sick with the disease, they wouldn't want to sign the form. Embarrassment, they just wouldn't go back to school. So we were creating strategy and helping leaders deal with this issue. We were wanting to write this book on leadership, and that's the book that's just come out recently, this book on leadership. How do you think about leadership in this time of crises and what's going on in Botswana? But in order to do that, we had to really write and think about organizational change, because these weren't leaders that were just leading in times of stability, they were leading in times of change. The second picture is Stephen's wife, Marla, who, long story short, was my first boss back in Procter & Gamble. We worked on this project and we wrote this book on organizational change. But before we can get organizational change right, we had to get teamwork right, because so much of what they did in managing this crisis was to create cross-functional teams, get groups of people together, and we were puzzled with how can we help them understand teamwork. And then when I mentioned this idea about false friend, because if you think about teamwork or leadership, a lot of those words are what they're slang words. So we'll say something like make an assist, thinking about like a hockey assist or a soccer assist. Or we might say move the chains. So think about the first downs in football, you move the chains every 10 yards. My favorite one is often we'll say something like stick handle, like who's gonna stick handle that? And I found that like fascinating to realize they meant like hockey, who's actually gonna handle the puck. Well, those concepts didn't make any sense in Botswana. That's not the culture they're from. So we were trying to really communicate, how do you think about leadership and change and culture and teamwork, really in the face of this sort of HIV growing issue that Botswana was facing. And then we got lucky. We got lucky in that this is my commercial for Botswana. If you've never been there, it's a great wild. I think Edmonton. So think Elk Island. Think any of the places where you go and see animals. They have the same thing. Although instead of the animals being, buffalo and elk, the animals are the animals you see on the screen: lions, wild dogs, cheetahs, and zebra. And there's an electric fence. An electric fence is so that the lions don't get out and eat the cattle that's in Botswana. Well, we were doing one of these and we'd heard about a lion kill. And that's going to be really cool because we're in Africa. We want to see big lions. That makes sense. And the guy that was driving our truck, in some sense, says, "You don't want to see lions. You don't want to see lions. We came to Africa to see lions." No, lazy in politics. I thought that's the start of a great story. So we started thinking about how groups of animals might help us to understand what we're really trying to get at in terms of the ideal teamwork. And that's what I'm going to walk you through right now. So the first one is zebras. Crazy question if you think about it. Why do zebras have stripes? And if you know the answer, or if you don't know the answer, it's probably going to surprise you. The answer is camouflage. And why it's such a crazy answer is that they're the only animal you can see in Africa. All the other animals are some shade of green or some shade of brown, and they blend in. So how do these black and white stripes lead to camouflage? Two rules in the African jungle you should know about. Rule number one: small will rarely attack big, because the small is worried that the big will kill it. The small doesn't want to have a suicide mission, so they just leave the big thing alone. Rule number two: once an animal of prey is looking after something, they focus on the one thing. So back in the good old days when there would be 300 of you in a room together, I would call on the person in the red shirt and I would say, because your shirt is red and that lion can see you, that lion wouldn't bother anybody else. Because if they got distracted by the other person in the pink shirt, then the person in the red shirt would leave. Then distracted by somebody else, they would leave, and they would get nothing. So you probably have seen TV shows or documentaries where you see one lion chasing a wildebeest, but there's 50 other wildebeest in the area and they're not running. That's why, because they know that the lion is not going to detract their attention. So imagine you're a group of zebra. Here's what happens. You're out there eating grass, no big deal, and all of a sudden you smell or see a lion. Well, one zebra stands next to another zebra, and then stands next to the next zebra, and all of a sudden what do you have? You have a line of zebra look much bigger than they did before. Too big for the lion, small really attacks big, lion's confused, and they go away. Now, if that was the case, where's the best place to be if you're a part of this zebra pack? To be in the middle, because then they would see black and white stripes, you, black and white stripes. But for those of you that raised your hand to be a leader, what do you think you're going to be? You're going to be at the front of this group. And I find this being so difficult for some leaders to understand. When things are good, there is no lion around. The lead zebra's in the front, eating the grass, no big deal. But as soon as there's danger, what does the lead zebra want to do? Get back in the middle where it's safe. And you've seen this, you've had this exchange. All of a sudden the leader says, "Hey team, what are we going to do?" What does the team say? "We are going to do nothing. You're going to go up there and you're going to face that lion." Now back to the real world. I think zebra teams are at a loss now, because zebra teams are used to just sort of blending in, not doing much, eating the grass. That's not 2022. In 2020, you have to go make things happen. You can't just wait for things to happen. And so that zebra teamness, I think, is dying, and you can sort of hear the sounds of that frustration. So our hunt for the ideal team analogy moves on. Lions. You think it's going to be lions. First, let's start with the reality. A group of lions go out on a hunt 10 times. They come back with a kill 3 times. So somewhat successful, but not amazingly successful. Now, why does this happen? First, let's think about how the pride is structured. There's an alpha male, the biggest lion, the strongest lion, the male lion, and there's an alpha female. The alpha female has the babies with the alpha male. Only ones that can mate, they're then cubs of that group. The alpha female stays back to take care of the cubs because no other lionesses would take care of mouse's cubs. That doesn't make evolutionary sense. Why would I be concerned with babies that aren't mine? So who goes and hunts? Not the alpha male, the biggest and strongest, the other lionesses. So the other lionesses, they go out and hunt, they make the kill. But here's what's interesting. Who gets the first bite? The alpha male. If you've ever heard of the phrase lion's share, it's worse than you think. The lion's share does not mean I eat the biggest, or the lion's share does not mean I eat first. The lion's share means because I'm the biggest lion, I eat all I want. And then the second biggest eats all they want. And then the third biggest, the lionesses really get to eat, and the cubs basically never get to eat. So if you're a lioness, you did all the hunting, what do you think you want to do? You want to grab a couple of bites before the alpha lion comes in, smacks you away, and gets the rest of the food. Well, what do you think happens? If the alpha male lion sees you doing that, he'll actually smack you off the hunt. Because in his mind, this is not about making the kill. This is about me eating first. This picture here, if you see this, I took this with an actual disposable camera. Why? Because we eventually did see that pride of lions and we saw them made a kill. And that lion was sunning himself underneath this tree like it was a Sunday picnic. You know why? Because he'd eaten all he wanted. The other lionesses, they barely got a chance to eat. And although they want to go hunt, because the alpha male is full, there is no hunting happening. So what would a pride of lion team look like in the real world? Authoritarian leader from the top. All the credit is given to the person at the top. And then you have this tension between the work and the rewards. Let's talk about those babies. As the baby lions get bigger and bigger and bigger, what happens to the alpha male lion? He just gets older and older and older. So at some point, the alpha male gets older and older, the baby lions get stronger and stronger. Eventually, that baby lion is going to become the alpha male, and they're going to get the lion's share. So this alpha male has to actually run off the baby lion. You may have experienced that. You have a great idea, you tell your boss, what does your boss say? I have a great idea. You have another great idea, you tell your boss, what does your boss say? I have a great idea. You have a third great idea, what does your boss say? It's time to get rid of her. She's not a team player. Because it looks like you're starting to get way more credit and it's disrupting the alpha male. So although you think you want to be like a pride of lions, you actually don't. Let's go to the next group, cheetah. Cheetah goes out on a hunt 10 times, they come back with a kill 4 times. If we know anything about cheetahs, what do we know? They're fast. They move really, really quickly, but not for long. What's really interesting is, think about the cheetah trying to go after those zebras. So I'm a zebra, I see the cheetah coming, I move over next to another zebra, doesn't catch me, too tired, takes a nap, and goes away. Next day, I see the cheetah coming, I move over next to a zebra, too tired, doesn't keep going, goes away. As a zebra, am I really, really nervous or worried about being killed? No. But is that cheetah just pissing me off? Yes. Leave me alone. Let me just stay here and eat the grass. Why do you keep making me move? But think about that in the organization. I used to call them program of the month managers. Every week they would come with a crazy new idea. But because they had enough stamina, they couldn't stick with it long enough. And even if the organization actually adopted the new idea, in effect, if the cheetah made a kill, they still have to stop and relax. Cheetahs have no sweat glands. So we sweat, dogs pant, cheetahs have no ability to do that. So they have to stop and rest. Here's what's interesting. Although lions kill 3 out of 10, and cheetahs kill 4 out of 10, a lion will actually take one of the kills from the cheetah. Because a lion realizes it's easy to get a dead zebra from a tired cheetah than to make the kill of a live zebra. So think about an organization. We like sometimes leaders that make strong, quick decisions, but we get frustrated if they don't stick with it. We like that we're going to be quick moving, but you in the organization goes, hey, what happened to that ABCD process? And someone says, ABCD process, that was changed 2 weeks ago by the XYZ process. So the hunt for this team moves on. What I want to say is a pack of wild dogs. First, full disclosure, they're ugly looking animals. All of my time over in Botswana, my sons would ask me for like a stuffed, animal. There is no stuffed wild dog that you're going to pick up and put in your bed. That would give your kids nightmares if you saw that. They're actually not dogs. They're in their own sort of, classification, but they're about the size of a yellow lab. And so then people call them dogs, but they actually are not a dog, and they're not a hyena. They're in their own class called wild dogs. First, let's go with the success. 8 out of 10. So that's why I say you want to be a pack of wild dogs, because they hunt 10 times to make a kill 8 times. The most successful hunting group, which is fascinating because they don't have the size of lions or the speed of cheetahs. So what do? They have about a pride of 20-25, not that much different than lions, alpha male, alpha female, but often the alpha male and alpha female goes on a hunt, which is fascinating because if the alpha female is hunting, who takes care of the babies? Wild dog pride, packs of wild dogs actually have babysitters. There are people in the pack that will take care of babies that aren't theirs. So now what happens? About 6 or 7 wild dogs go out on a hunt. Male, female, doesn't matter. If they see a zebra, they locate themselves strategically so that one wild dog is sort of taking a small step toward the zebra, and instinctively, the zebra is going to move. So the zebra doesn't move versus worried, it's just instinct. We all get that. The hairs on the back of our neck stand up, and that causes us to think. Same idea. Well, that wild dog moved it to another wild dog. That wild dog takes 2 steps. Now the zebra goes this way. Next wild dog takes 2 steps. Now the zebra goes this way. Eventually, what happens? Eventually, the wild dog, the zebra, is not by the other zebra, and the zebra goes, crap, I'm by myself, and I sort of see these animals coming. I guess I should start running. All the while, the wild dogs are making the exact same decisions, moving a little this way, moving a little this way, moving a little this way. Now, if you think about it, who's doing the most running? The zebra, because the wild dogs can take a break while the other wild dogs are moving the wild dog toward them. Some hunts last days. Most hunts, they actually don't kill the zebra. The zebra drops over from exhaustion. The zebra's down, the wild dog feeds their bellies, and then they try to hide it away from the lions, and then they go back to the den and they regurgitate the food for the babies. The babies eat first. While the babies are eating, the babysitters are also eating. So now who do you think is ready to hunt the next day? The babysitters, because they are rested and fed. So the continual deployment of the strongest and the healthiest going out for the hunt, and then the commitment that the kill is for everyone in the den, not just for the ones that made the kill, and clearly not for the alpha male. Because of that, that's why they're so successful. So imagine I said your team was like a pack of wild dogs. Think for a minute, what do you think the skills would be that would be needed to be like this pack of wild dogs? We did some research on this, and we said we think these are the 4 skills needed. First, pack vision. And we had to separate or create another word, because as soon as I say vision, you roll your eyes over. You all have a vision statement at your organization. It doesn't mean anything. But if I'm a pack of wild dogs, the vision is not we're going on a hunt. The vision is not we're hunting zebra. The vision is we are hunting that specific zebra. Think about the level of coordination that you would need in order to be able to be that successful. So, vision. The second is pack leadership. Here's a trick question. Who's in charge of the hunt? Well, it depends on who's closest to the prey. Because if I'm closest to the prey, my job is, can I make a strike? If I can't make a strike, I push it over to the next wild dog. Well, once it gets to the next wild dog, they're in charge. I tend to think about this. If you've ever done like gone to buy a car or gone to buy a sofa, and let's say you walk into one of these big showrooms. I bought a sofa last fall. And I walked into the showroom, and the guy that was trying to sell me the sofa, it just wasn't a match. For some reason, maybe because he looked at me, he thought I'll try the urban slang style. So, hey, my brother, what's happening? Like that kind of, it didn't work. It just wasn't a match. I wasn't interested in spending time with this person. So then what would a wild dog do? A wild dog would have a different salesperson comes over. What did he do? He just kept harassing me and kept hounding me. So eventually, I left the store. I think in his mind, he thought, if he doesn't make the sale, he doesn't want anyone to make the sale. That's lion thinking. Wild dog thinking is, I'll celebrate whoever makes the sale Because if someone makes a sale in their store, we all do well. We all benefit. So, pack leadership. Individual skill, you got to be able to babysit. You got to be able to hunt. You got to be able to run. So you actually have to have some skill requirements that move around. But I think the ugliest of all the skills, tenacity. How long do hunts last? But think about this for a minute. Let's just play a little thought exercise. There are 25 of you in this pack of wild dogs. 6 babies, so they don't hunt at all, they're the babies. So I got about 17, 18 people are going to hunt. Group of 6 goes on a hunt. They take 6 hours. They come back with a kill. You've eaten the 12 that were babysitting. You've eaten once, haven't done any work. Another group of wild dogs go out the next day to go hunt. Let's say they take 7 hours, 9 hours to make a kill. They come back. Well, one group has eaten once, the ones that hunted the day before, but there are still 6 left that haven't hunted yet. They've now eaten twice without making any contribution to the pack. So when it's their turn to finally contribute to the pack, how long do you think they're going to stay out there and hunt? Are they going to stay out there a minute and say, I'm sorry, we couldn't find anything? Chances are they're going to stay out there as long as possible till they make the kill. Why? Because they benefited from being a part of the group before they've done any work to contribute to the group. That leads to 2 sort of bottom skills that I think packs of wild dogs need. The first one is you got to deal with conflict. You got to deal with what happens the 2 out of 10 times you don't make the kill. Did the prey move? Did we not do the coordination? Don't just leave it up to chance. Now, I have some time left, but I'm going to give you the shortest way to understand conflict. Everything we know about diversity, everything we know about conflict in teams boils down to 2 points. Task conflict, always positive. We have different people with different viewpoints. We should discuss the different viewpoints. That may lead to arguing over which viewpoint is the right viewpoint, but we should stay on the viewpoint, the task. How are we going to achieve this goal? Interpersonal conflict, always negative. While we might discuss and argue about the viewpoints, there is no value in discussing and arguing about the person. So in a very weird way, a healthy level of conflict, I should be able to say, your idea doesn't make any sense because I'm talking about the idea. What I should never say is, you don't make any sense because now I'm talking about the person. And so when it comes to conflict, here's the challenge. Often we hear interpersonal task conflict. We hear interpersonal conflict when the person is giving us task conflict. So that person says, I'm not quite sure if I understand the idea. The idea doesn't make any sense, but I hear he's saying I don't make any sense. I break down, that's dysfunctional. But sometimes it's the opposite. I'm worried about giving you task disagreements or giving you feedback on your task because I'm worried about you taking it in as if I'm giving you feedback about you. So I'm hesitant to say the idea doesn't make sense because I'm worried you're going to hear me saying you don't make sense. So you need a healthy dose of conflict in organizations. There's a book out, not that new now, it's called Radical Candor. And basically in the book Radical Candor, she says successful cultures have 2 arrows. They care deeply about each other and they relentlessly pursue the goal. Sounds like a pack of wild dogs. They care so much about each other that they actually let the babies eat first. But their relentless pursuit of the goal is why they're successful 8 out of 10 times. So one base skill of wild dogs is how do you manage conflict? There's another base skill too. It's about trust. So for them to work, I'm babysitting. I got to trust you're going to come back with a kill. I pushed the zebra over to you. I got to trust you're ready. You're going to make the right decision. So just think for a minute. I put some examples here. When I say trust, what do you think I mean by that word trust? So if I said, pick a person in your head that you trust the most. I don't really care who the person is, but I'm curious about why you trust them the most. You might say things that I have here. They walk the talk, they do what they say, they're honest, they care about me, they're able to deliver. So remember those pictures before? Me, Steven, we're in Botswana. His wife, Marla, we work on the books in Botswana. Steven went off and did this research on trust. And he said, I can take all of what we think about trust and I can boil it down to three attributes. First one is consistency. We all have a friend that is always 10 minutes late. So when I say meet you for coffee at 12, I know they're going to show up at 12:10. I know it so much, I plan for it. I don't worry about getting there at 12 o'clock. It would actually be weird to me if I got there at 12:05 and they were already there. Because it's not about you have to always be on time. It's I can predict it. You're consistent. You're going to say what it is you're going to do what it is you said. If you told me you were going to do something, I trust you're going to do it. Second, commitment. We trust people that are what I say are team us. So my two oldest sons, Marvin and Miles, often say something because Miles will have a difficult thing going on. He's trying to navigate life like most 22-year-olds now between school, he's got a girlfriend, a job, all of this stuff. He'll come to me hesitantly. I'll say, time out. Miles, I'm team Miles. I'm on your side of the table. We're not going to argue over this. I care about you first. Now let's have a conversation. And I think they can trust me to understand that. The third one is interesting though. Trust is also about capability. Do you have the skill to deliver on what you want to deliver? I'd mentioned my son Miles. When Miles was 5, 6 years old, I had a nephew, his cousin Casey, that came to stay with us. Casey was about 14, 15 years old, and Casey was about 6'6" and could dunk a basketball. So 6-year-old Miles saw 14-year-old Casey dunk a basketball. 6-year-old Miles comes to me and says, Dad, I'm going to dunk this basketball. And I'm thinking, Miles, no, you're not. He says, yes, I am. Miles, no, you're not. And I never forget, he said, Dad, you don't trust me? So think about that. Now I'm at an interesting conversation with my 6-year-old son. He used the T word, you don't trust me. And what was my response? You know what? I clearly trust your commitment. You wake up every day. We lived in Texas at the time. It's really hot, and you are running at that goal, trying to touch it. And you're running at that goal, trying to dunk. I clearly see your consistency. I don't have to ask where's Miles. Miles is outside trying to dunk this basketball. So you're consistent in terms of you every day try to do it. You're committed in terms of you don't do other things in order to do it. I don't think you have the capability. I think it's a skill deficiency. Now, that's a totally different conversation to talk about capability or to talk about consistency than it is to talk about trust in some sense. So imagine you and your organizations as you are now trying to work remotely all over the place. Often I hear in organizations that it's hard to develop trust in this remote world. Whereas we were face to face, I could see you, I could interact with you. Is it trust you're worried about, or is it commitment? I don't quite know what you're doing when I'm in front of you. Well, you don't know what I'm doing, or you don't know how to get my attention when we're not together. Is it consistency? Sometimes I can find you, sometimes not. Sometimes your work is great, sometimes it's not. Or is it capability? I think this is a training issue. Your ability to tease those three out may actually help you as you move forward in terms of trust. Now, that opens up an interesting conversation. I talked about what makes you trust people. What if I asked you, how do you build trust? Because again, you might be an individual wild dog trying to join a pack of wild dogs. So what makes them trust you? Trustworthiness is capable, committed, and consistent. Your willingness to trust is you have to invest in a relationship. This is the toughest thing about trust. You're in a relationship with someone and they broke your trust. The only way to get their trust again is to take a risk that they will potentially break your trust again. You have to invest in a relationship. If I want to develop a trusting relationship with you, I have to invest in it, spend time with you, get to know you. And then often I have to examine the assumptions. Maybe my issue of trust has nothing to do with you. It might deal with what I project onto you. My first sort of a professor of mine when I went to graduate school, her name was Lee Thompson. I'll never forget her, although this is now 20, 25 years ago, because she was 6'6", the tallest woman I'd ever been around. And whenever I was around her, the back of my hairs would stand up on my neck. I just didn't understand it. And I would tell myself that she was doing something, or I tell myself that, we didn't get along. And finally I stopped. I said, that's actually not true because we don't really interact enough for not to get along. What's going on here? I had to examine my assumptions as to why I do or don't trust her. You know what I realized? My mom's 5 foot tall. My wife, 5 foot tall. First girlfriend I ever had, 5 foot tall. So it was me feeling uncomfortable looking up to this woman for the first time. But I was projecting all of this onto her when it was also really about me. So when you want to develop trust, think about your willingness. Are you investing? Now let's go back to this remote world. How are you investing in trust in a remote world? Examine assumptions. Are you projecting behaviors onto them that are really more about you? And then risk, how you take a risk in this world. I want to come back to a couple of things as we're getting ready to close in a little bit. The first one is, and this is fascinating. I've done this wild dog thing for a while, and people have often given me little articles or something like that that tells me what's going on. Hey, and then about 3 years ago, this was their research of people that study wild dogs that puzzled them. Since wild dogs are so flat in the organization, even the alpha male goes out on a hunt. The question is, who organizes the hunt? With a pride alliance is easy. The alpha male, the pride, the big dog in the lion pride says, I'm hungry. You ladies go hunt. Pretty straightforward. How does it work with wild dogs? So people that study wild dogs started studying this. And they said, what's interesting is when they wake up, come out of their dens, they stretch, and they make a sound that sounds like a sneeze. And so they drew an org chart. Remember, wild dogs have alpha male, alpha female. Wild dogs, you could actually make a structure of wild dogs. And they looked at how the sneezes correlate with the structures that influence the hunt. And you know what they found? They found that if you are a senior wild dog, you need 3 other wild dogs to sneeze for a hunt to happen. That sort of makes sense. If it's Marvin's consulting company and I'm Marvin, I probably need a couple other people to, verify my thinking before we make a decision. But here's what's also interesting. If you are the junior wild dog, do you think you can get a hunt going? The answer is yes. You just need 11 other people to sneeze. But that also makes sense. If it's Marvin's consulting company and I've built this company from the ground up, and if you come in having only been there one day and you say, hey boss, we should totally change what we're doing, maybe get a little bit more support first in order to make this happen. Maybe spend some time getting some support people around you before you do this. What I enjoy this is that what this means is you can make it happen, not that you're unable to. It just takes a little bit more support. I want to end with a couple of thoughts about how my time in Botswana doing this sort of AIDS crisis and leadership might help you today as we're dealing with the economy, we're dealing with COVID, and a bunch of other things. First one, you got to make sense of you. You got to first decide if you are a wild dog before you can join packs of wild dogs. This is from the book Flow, Mahai Csikszentmihalyi. You can drive a car all your life without knowing how the engine works, but to live an entire life without understanding how we think, what we feel, what directs our actions is to miss what's most important. So I think before, many of us was moving along like zebra. We were taken care of, things were fine, and then boom, economy. And then boom, COVID. And now boom, Black Lives Matters or whatever the social movement is that's frustrating us now. It's causing us to stop and think. What do I think about these things? What's my connection to these things? So in a sense, make sense of you. In order to do that, you might have to spend time in prison. All influential leaders all spend time in prison. Why? I think their time in prison gave them time to think. Now that's the easy answer. They spent time thinking. The hard question is, what do you think they thought about? I bet they thought about, I wonder how I got into prison. Because that was not their goal the first day, was to go to prison. So maybe your first thing to think about is, how did I get here? Wherever the here is. How does this make sense? And then your second question is, what do I want to do now that I am here? Second one, lean in. We got some difficult days. Wild dogs go toward the difficult days. They take down prey that's bigger than them. In the interest of time, I want to move on to a couple of more. The third one is, and this is the one I want to move on to, it takes work. This is my son, Miles. Miles always wanted to be a basketball player, but he was short. Remember the 6-year-old trying to dunk a basketball? And then he realized it just takes work. If I want to be a basketball player and be short, I work really hard. And so when he was like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, he'd be the little kid dribbling with 2 basketballs going to school every day. Why? It was a 15-minute walk. He could dribble all day to become a better dribbler. I like his quote. Life is like tag. Sometimes you have to be it. The fun part of the game tag is being the one that's being chased. I get to hide if you don't find me. The hard part of tag is being the one that's doing the chasing. You want to be successful in life, sometimes you got to do the chasing. Yeah. Why? Because if you do that, make sense of you, lean into the difficult days, not run from it, and then put in the work, you'll get to shine. On your own time, you can watch this video. It's literally called Lone Nut Dancing. I'm not asking you to be the lone nut dancing. That's entrepreneurship. That's creativity. That's innovation. I'm asking you to be the second guy. Because if you see the video, the first guy dances by himself for a while. And then the second guy shows up. And as soon as the second guy shows up, before long, everyone shows up. You know why? I think everyone wanted to be the second guy. They were just afraid of being the second guy. I have 2 more that I want to add, and I'll be done. The first one is, I think in this specific time today, if there is a skill I would leave you with, especially in a remote world, people need to know you care. That's the thing that we can't build unintentionally. When we're in the office, I could just happen to walk by the office and say, let's go get a cup of coffee. I could just happen to see, but the Zoom world makes everything formal. And the fact that everything becomes super formal really then means that it's hard for people to know how much you care about them. I love her quote. I've learned that people forget what you said, people forget what you did, people will never forget how you made them feel. So the question is, I know it's difficult to do. It's difficult to send across through this computer that I care for you, but that's the goal for you to think about. Last 2 thoughts. When you are communicating, you have to communicate over and over again. I often used to think about this. I went to a leadership seminar, and the guy who was talking said, you know you've communicated well when the people you're talking to can do a great impression of you. That's a big challenge in terms of a Zoom world. Why? Because people don't see enough clues to be able to communicate. But when you don't communicate, we fill in the vacuum with rumors. Last thought, we're in this for a while. So instead of piecemealing conversations, I would leapfrog. Not what are we doing next week? What do I think we're doing a year from now? And then let's set that up for now as we think about that. Thanks for taking the time. Hopefully I said something that was of interest and value, and I'll allow us now to have question and answers if there are some questions.
So let's take some questions from the audience. We have one from Tracy, and she's asking, what behaviors did you notice in the wild dogs that stood out most to you?
Great question. I think it really was the coordination. It was fascinating to sort of watch. And again, I've been to Botswana a lot of times. And so again, literally the one thing you do is do on game hunts. So I've done maybe 15 or 20 of these game ride type things. And in order to watch the level of coordination, they literally do fan out. They pick one zebra or one wildebeest or one springbuck, which is like a deer. And the coordination to sort of separate it from the herd, and then the coordination to sort of get it to tire itself out, I could watch it for hours. Lions sort of make a one strike. It didn't happen. Oh, well, no big deal. But that to me is really what got me thinking about, do we think about teams in the real world with that level of coordination? Not with the, here's the goal, go make a kill. But more, that means you might do this, and then I might do this, and then we might change what we do halfway through. So thinking of it that way, I think really sort of what started us to think about this. If I can add one more sentence, but if you think about in the real world, a pack of wild dogs, the closest we can get, Cirque du Soleil. So if you notice the story of Cirque du Soleil, I love a story because it literally is three clowns walked into a bar. One was an actual clown, one was I think a stilt walker, and one was a fire eater. And they were bemoaning about the fact that the circus is a dying thing. Again, who wants to see elephants in a cage? But they liked the idea. So they had a crazy idea. What if we had a circus with no animals? Then they ran into Steve Wynn. And Steve Wynn says, I'm building a hotel in Vegas and I don't want the typical act, comedian, lounge singer. I want someone else. So it went from a circus problem to a location problem. He took the lead. And then they said, well, if you're going to put this act together, you need music. Steve Wynn introduced him to George Harrison from the Beatles. George Harrison said, well, let me go work with my production, because if you know the Beatles story, they didn't actually own the music, to see if I can get the rights to the music for you to put this show on. So who was in charge of Cirque du Soleil? Was it the clowns? Was it Steve Wynn? Was it George Harrison? It depends on where was the problem. And as the problem kept moving, the coordination allowed them to make this happen.
Thanks. I think it actually answers one of another questions that came in from Sarita, who was asking which organization that you'd studied or worked with had exemplified that wild dog team style. So we actually have another one from Ruth Ann, who's saying, thank you for a very dense and full presentation. Can you talk about projection and bias and how best to mitigate it in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I think this is where I gave the example of me with sort of the tall person. I first start with, it sounds funny, as I say this out loud, I start with, it's never about the snake. It's always about me. So that's a weird, it's not selfish in the sense of I think I'm narcissistic. It's more, I move the camera back to see that I'm a part of this play. I'm a part of this show. So often we look at the world like this. And because we do, we never see our own contribution to this. We never see our own part of this. And so when I say I start with it's about me, I move the camera back to see me in the show. So I have an interaction with you. I have an interaction with a random person. It doesn't go what I think is perfect. My first question is, how did I contribute to that? Now, did the other person contribute to that? Potentially, possibly. But how did I contribute to that? And it's not like I always contribute to that. Sometimes somebody just gives me bad customer service at the restaurant. But before I start and yell at that person as if it's their fault, I start and think about me. Am I coding it wrong? Do I see it different? Is it something in my mind which really helps me unpack this bias? Now, what's the cost of that? It takes longer to do that. We often live in a world filled with bias. Why? We can make quick decisions. I've seen this situation before. Here's the answer. Let me get to the answer. What I'm asking you to do is to slow it down. And by moving yourself into the picture, it's going to force you to slow it down. Great question.
Thanks. I think we might have time for one or maybe two more questions. We have an anonymous question from the audience asking, how do you create a wild dog team when there are many lions and cheetahs as teammates?
Yeah, this is such a great question, because as we wrote the book, the last chapter in the book was not part of the original book. But you write the book and then the publisher gets it and then the publisher sends it out. Clearly somebody they sent it to was a lion, because they hated the fact that we made the wild dogs the hero of the narrative and not the lion the hero. So we had to reconcile that. We're not saying that lions are never needed. We're saying lions are going to lead to burnout at a much higher rate. Lions are going to spit out other people really quickly, because as long as I can yell at you, you'll work hard until what? You get tired of being yelled at. And I got to find another person to yell at until they get tired of yelling at. So it's hard to build a culture that's going to sustain the workers. And that's why I had that triangle that said leadership and culture. If you got a lion leader, that must be the culture they want. But if you're asking the lion leader to change the culture, then that's going to come because the culture is going to stop reacting to the lion leader. The culture say, I understand you're yelling at me. That's not going to get me to respond. That's a painful thing to do. That's a difficult process to sort of attack the leader going up, because you're going to have to put up with more yelling. If you know people, when they yell at you, you don't do anything. They don't often get quiet. They yell more in some sense. So I think that's a difficult thing to navigate. Can it be done? Yes. You just got to sort of not respond to the lion style. And at some point, that lion will realize this isn't benefiting me. And this isn't benefiting me, that might open the window for a different style. Admittedly, it's the harder one. The cheetah one is a little easier. Yeah.
Thanks. I think we have time. One last little question we can squeak in. Do you have any tips for demonstrating genuine caring and sharing in a virtual space such as Zoom?
Yeah, and so this is one where, as professors, we've really been wrestling with this because we often had office hours. And especially when I taught the first year, second year undergrad class, a lot of the office hours are really just places for care. I'm a first year student in business. Oh my God, I'm lonely. I don't know anybody. The professor, nodded at some question that I said in class. So I'll go to his office hours, and that gives me a chance to get to know them a little more. Well, in a virtual world, what does office hours look like? And so we've wrestled with this in some sense. And it sounds funny, but it looks like office hours. What if you, the boss, said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be on Zoom for 2 hours on Tuesday from 2 to 4. No agenda, no nothing. If you ever had any questions or wanted to share something you didn't feel comfortable sharing, you can find me there. Because we've opened up some spaces, I've started doing small group coffee hours in the park. Hey, you know what? I go for a walk in this park, usually every day. On Thursday, I stop by a cup of coffee. If you ever have a question and want to get a hold of me, you'll see me at the park. So that's like the passive ones. I'm available, come see me. The more active ones might be, you suggest that. But in order to do that, I got to know about you and your walking schedule. I got to know about you and your coffee schedule. Because if I said, hey, Alyssa, let's go do coffee, and you don't drink coffee, that's not going to create a sense of I care and concern. But if I know you drink tea, and I say, you know what? I know you drink tea. It's probably been a while since you've been out. Why don't we go meet at blah, 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 and have a tea and walk? Because we can go outside and walk, even with a coat on. Wear our burdens. This is not that big of a deal. We can socialize this way. Why don't you get your tea? I get my coffee, and we just catch up. I haven't talked to you in a while. That takes some work as a leader to do now. And I think the fact that we're remote means it's probably more work than we've thought of, because when we were face to face, it was lazy. I literally just walked by your cubicle or walked by your office and said, hey, come with. But I think you can do it. You just have to be a bit more intentional.
Thanks. I think that's all the time we have for questions. So thank you, Dr. Washington, for sharing your expertise and knowledge with all of us today.
And thanks for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
We'd like to hear what you thought about today's program, so please provide your feedback on our short poll. And as today's discussion showed us, UCalgary is a place that ignites curiosity, determination, and ingenuity. Energized by our philanthropic community, including more than 12,000 alumni who gave in support to the historic $1.45 billion Energize the Campaign for Eyes High, we are creating lasting positive change on campus, in our city, and beyond. We are doing this by elevating student experience, accelerating research outcomes, and strengthening community connections. You inspire us to push our limits and inspire the wider community to invest in our shared vision. So thank you. Thank you again for joining us today. And as our thanks to you for joining us, you will receive an email with a code for a $10 off online purchase at Calgary Heritage Roasting Company, which was founded by UCalgary grad Jamie Parker. We'd like to invite you to attend another event during Alumni Month. Implications of Learning in a Digital Age is hosted by the Workland School of Education and will take place on Monday, September 21st. There's more to learn. Please explore everything that Alumni Month has to offer at alumni.ucalgary.ca/alumni-month. A recording of today's session will also be posted to the Alumni Month website in the coming days. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.